So in this video, we're actually going to get down to building our homepage with content links, quick links, documents, events, and all this other good stuff. But let's talk about the thought process and the strategy with building out this content. It's so easy to build this stuff now that it makes sense to spend more time on the planning and in the strategy and the messaging of your content. All right, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, so let's go ahead and build out our main homepage. So we kind of have our site together, we have our theme going on, we have placeholders all in place. So what we want to do, we're going to go through this homepage and start building it out. So this is, you're going to see a lot of pausing in this video because a lot of this is just repeatable tasks, mundane tasks. But what I'm going to do for each one of these web parts as we walk through it, and we're going to try to do most of this is out of the box, right? Because that's a cool thing about the modern site. You can do, I would say, 85 to 90% out of the box. The other percentage would be something like a custom extension. So for this particular one, let's start with the hero web part. And you saw how we kind of divided this out, trying to give it more real estate. And the idea behind here, so you got several different mechanisms to kind of push information out. The hero is going to kind of be like key information, like an announcement, or maybe a critical news article or something like that you want to draw attention to. Because it takes up so much real estate, you really want to leverage the image and the title to drive that message home. And this is only supposed to be for really important pieces there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go off, I'm going to pause this video, I'm going to go off and fill up these 5 blocks. What I feel, if we were building a Tesla modern intranet site in Office 365 for the Tesla company, what would they want to announce based on current activity within the organization? Of course, I'm not affiliated with Tesla. I haven't worked with Tesla, so this is outside looking in. I'm just a big fan of the vehicle. Outside looking in, what I think, based on my experience with working with other organizations, where are key announcements or information that they would like to present. Okay, so I'm gonna go away, fill this up, and then I'll come back and then I'll explain my thought process, why I chose certain things, why images work to help communicate the message, and so on. All right, give me 2 and 2. Okay, so this is what I came up with. So I filled these 5 slots, what I thought would be 5 key, announcements within the organization. So at the time of this video, the 35,000 Model 3 is a major announcement from Tesla. So of course we want to highlight that. You want to, you want the conversation to be more so in the form of internal communication within the company versus outside. And then also you will see here that I have announcement, as far as like major announcement from staff changes or someone adding, joining the company. Agile, there's a lot of organizations that are rolling out Agile or still refining their Agile process. So really this is just kind of help push that home. Meetings tips, these can be tips and tricks that just kind of form out. And then, of course, there's product and new application rollout. So of course you want to have these for every application, but maybe major applications that have effect on the majority of the company or maybe a key department within the organization. So adding these are pretty straightforward. I mean, if you go into the Webpart options here, you have the little pencil to modify each one of these. If you get it wrong, or maybe when you go to send this off for approval, if someone says, hey, maybe we should highlight Tom versus the model 335K or something like that, you can easily switch these around. And that's why when you're selecting these images, it's important to get a high res image because you never know which box any of these to kind of fit into. The only concern I have with the hero graphic web part, which is this web part, is really like the title, because you don't really have a lot of real estate to cram a lot in. So your titles have to be punchy, they have to be relevant, and they have to be the perspective of the current user. So you'll see a lot of you or tips or things along those lines that kind of add value to kind of really sell the click. The images should reflect the title So, if I have meetings there, I have a picture of Tom for Dynamics 365 rollout because that's more of a shop application. Or, this rollout is regarded to those who are actually working on the shop floor. So, I have images to kind of relate to that. And then also, one of the things to consider is that when you're building these out, where they link to is going to be as important as the teaser, right? So if I click on this Dynamic 365, here you see I have like what you would call like a one sheet. And really what you want to do is give a sample of key information about that particular service, product, organization, person, whatever you're highlighting. So here I have a Dynamics 365 image of the actual app or Power App or whatever the case that may be. Key contacts on how you can get involved, training links on how to get trained up, the different roles of different training. And then you will see key documents, also like a list of stream videos or things along those lines to really, again, help drive the information about this particular product, service, person, department, whatever you're highlighting home. But you want to do snippets of this information so that way they can launch off to different areas depending on their needs and their interests. All right, so that's it for the hero graphic. Again, is probably one of the most important because it's highlighted. Images are the ones that really kind of draw people's attention. The link is what's going to sell. The title, I'm sorry, is what's going to sell the link. So spend a lot of time on, really the messaging, and then also where you're going to take them, and to make sure that you kind of give them, like, I would recommend an intermediate page to really kind of drive home, because at the end, like with this Dynamic 365, allow you a landing page for them to branch off into different areas, but keep everything holistic and centered around that particular piece of content. All right, so now let's take a look at our quick links. And I'm going to go ahead and build this out. So let me pause the video. I'll be back in 2 and 2. Okay, so this is what I have for the quick links. So actually, we use these as tiles, and that's going to give you this nice block look. So if you kind of go into edit mode and then look at the edit options for this Webpart, this is the tile format. And what you can do, you can explode these up. I usually don't go any bigger than large because I still want the titles to show, right? And when you go extra large or fill space, that's not an option. So what I want to, so you want to use the tile. That's going to give you this nice block look. I usually don't give these a title, only because it kind of matches the hero Webpart when you're side by side. You kind of get this extra space here at the bottom. Sometimes I throw a Webpart out there, or probably just leave it empty, right? There's only so much you can do. Maybe you can get away with throwing a image Webpart if you want to do like a small banner. The problem with throwing a Webpart in this area, it seems like there's default spacing for a Webpart, even if it's empty, for a Webpart to accommodate certain real estate. And from my experience, it just takes up too much to where you can never get these to balance out. But it's just one of those small things that I wouldn't too much worry about. But here, I mean, if you're kind of looking at the content, and this is where you really want to spend some time planning, with trying to figure out, what is the most bang for the buck for majority of the users that come to the homepage. Now, you're not going to nail everybody, but if you can hit the majority, I think you're going to get a lot of great feedback that these links or what you're highlighting are going to be useful. Again, I wouldn't do this in a vacuum. I would probably build something and then take it to key members that represent other people of the organization and have them vet it. And I think that's what the homepage in its entirety, like once we kind of build this out, the next step is to go in, put a coalition together and have them vet it and make sure that, you're sending the right message, and then identify who's actually going to own these pieces of the homepage, or which group is going to own the homepage in the event there's additional requests coming in to kind of keep things relevant. So really that's it. So basically what you're seeing here, again, just some ideas, but when you're looking at Office 365, you got information that's kind of scattered all over the place. If you can just make things relevant to their fingertips in an event like this, I think that would be ideal. Anything centered around what their day-to-day as far as like meetings and tasks and projects, I think the menu option is good. One of the things that I think to really get the bang for the buck, this is probably one of those components or web parts that would probably be better value if they were extended, meaning that if you can take the information of the current user and highlight certain pieces of links based on their AD attributes or the graph API attributes. Another piece I think would be extendable from a development standpoint is to allow them. Most organizations or most users will want to customize these, only because every individual within the organization have different needs depending on what they're working on. So I think allowing them to customize these would probably be another opportunity from a custom extension piece. And here I'm just highlighting weather for key organizations at the bottom. Again, I think this is just one of those areas that probably are better suited if they were either dynamic, meaning that you take the current location of the user and display the weather there. I think that would probably be more useful. Even if I'm out of the Los Angeles office, if I'm traveling to a different city, it's more valuable to have the current weather for the current city I'm in. So I think, again, another opportunity from a custom standpoint. And if we can get into this in another series where we actually start to create SharePoint development web parts using SPFx to really kind of augment or complement, the out-of-the-box features where there are gaps, I think that would be more useful. All right, so now let's get into our news and events. So what I'm going to do, and let me pause this video, let me go ahead and build out the news area and the events. I think these are going to be pretty straightforward, not a lot of commentary behind there, but again, it's just going to complement what we have here. Now, when you get to the news, you don't want to duplicate what's here. You definitely want to complement what's here, and we can talk about, some of the thought process behind that. Okay, 2 and 2. Okay, so here we are. We have the news section and the event section kind of built out. Again, this is pretty much self-explanatory once you kind of get in there and start toying around. But again, it's just matching images and the title, making sure that, it kind of drives the message home. You can, right here from the new option, just do a new post to create new, or the new link to actually create a news article just based off of a URL that's out on the internet, and it will automatically pull in the title, description, and then the image. And it also gives you some options to overwrite, which is pretty handy. When it comes to the ordering, this is one of the things to be aware of. You can't switch the order, not until this new feature is rolled out. I have this new feature enabled now that allows you to, if I go into this edit web part, it allows you to select one of these articles and then bump it to kind of change the ordering. So far, I think that's still being rolled out because it's just not working as expected. But that's the expectation, is that once you kind of get like your highlighted articles out there, you can position them to be highlighted, because, the first one kind of gets a little bit more real estate, which is a little bit more emphasis. These news articles are stored in the site pages library, which is behind the scenes. Which is cool because you can add in custom columns and then leverage those columns to filter or display how you want this news to display, right? So not only can you just say only display the news from this hub or recommend it from the current user, that would kind of leverage the graph API or artificial intelligence to determine which ones are important for the current user. You can also come up and, I think you need a different web part, but I think highlighted web part or page properties, right? So you can also use page properties. I don't have any defined here, but if you define custom columns on that pages library, you can then use page properties to filter these. So like only if you wanted to highlight Model 3 articles or Model S articles. For the home page, I think it's going to be everything. But if you had like a subsequent page within the site, you can further filter down on the type of news you want displayed on that particular page, and the page properties is going to be very handy for that. Outside of that, I need to play around with these layouts, see which one is the best fit for you. Definitely play around with the source to see which one is the best fit for your particular scenario. For us is, because we're establishing the hub, it makes sense. Now, taking a closer look at events, you can come up in events and then filter these by category. If you need to display different categories for a particular event, you can just go into site contents. Let me just pop this open in a new tab. You go to site contents, go to the event list, and then just like any standard list within SharePoint, you go to site settings, and by default for event categories, you're going to get like a handful of these by default. But you can come in here and click on the category column and then customize this that better fits your needs or better fit your organization needs. So that way you can, and this is important, right? I mean, this is where planning really kind of come into play, is that if you get this right, then you can reuse these events in many different scenarios, even with other sites within the hub, because then you can say, oh, I need this event. I also want, so here's the scenario. I also want events that are managed by this group who manages the homepage to display on my page in addition to some other events, right? And those are the type of scenarios, because you establish that site within the same hub and you're leveraging these categories, you can finagle that to make those options available to you in the Webpart properties, right? And that's why, when you're looking at these Webpart properties, you see what options you have. Events is one of them, source is another. It's really important to kind of see what you have and then plan accordingly based off of that, with the understanding that, one, what you have is just a snapshot in time. You can have more capabilities come in sooner in the future. And then two, you want to get away from having to customize anything that's available out of the box. So understand what the guardrails are, how you're going to play within those guardrails, and then position your content accordingly to kind of match that to maximize the use of out of the box. When it comes to this last section here, this is really just going to be a section for documents. I mean, if you look at this, I would say all sites, right? So regardless if they're creating a document within this hub or on another site, you kind of want this tailored to the current user. And this is why we have that created by, modified by. I don't think there's any change there other than probably the title, probably say my documents or my recent documents or something like that. The same is true for site. So if you're doing frequent sites for the current user, just say my recent sites, right? So that way it's clear on where these are being pulled from, and explain also why these would be different from a colleague looking at the homepage from their computer sitting next to someone else and they get a different set of documents. That makes sense. I think when it comes to featured links, this is just going to be standard of building out links. Again, just another opportunity for you to link off to other areas in the organization that are very popular, really kind of complement what you have here at the top, right? So if you look at the difference between this set of links here and then what's down here as feature, again, it's just another bucket, give you another opportunity to highlight other links that make sense, that may be on the lower priority, understanding that they have to scroll to this level to really kind of take advantage of them. So it's going to be a lower priority, but again, it's just additional real estate to where you can highlight key information, right? So I think that's it for this video. Oh, here's one other thing I do want to highlight. So in the future, or actually in development now, is the modern audience targeting, which is really going to change the game for a lot of these different capabilities, especially from a news perspective, because I think this is the one where everyone's fighting or grabbing for this type of real estate, right? Especially if the intranet is the main window pane to where a lot of information is pushed out. We're getting away from email and sending all that information announcements via email, and we're pushing it more so from an intranet or communication standpoint, leveraging these sites. And with that, the news becomes major real estate, the hero graphic becomes major real estate, and every department feels that certain pieces that are going on in their organization needs to be pushed out from a communication standpoint. So you're going to have a lot of competing communication pieces, and audience targeting is really just going to help out with that, because with the audience targeting, now you're in a position to shoot out news per location or news per department. And there's audience targeting, meaning that it's going to be more of a filter than a security trim. If you need a security trim, that like articles that only should be available for executives or people at a certain level, you want to create those on a site where the security of that site is locked down to only those users. Create those news articles, join it to this hub, and then in the hub, in this news network here, it will highlight, because not only is this news network going to be security trim, in the future it will also be audience trim. So security trim is going to be first. If you have the security right, there is no way that someone who doesn't have access to that content will be able to view that content. That's one. If it's audience targeted, it's more of a preference. Like if there's no other news for this user, push this news up first. If there are additional buckets, then give them access to news that, or then display news that they have access to. So it's just a different piece, a different way of thinking of that, a different way of planning for that. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap. I think this homepage really turned out to be valuable, right? And that's subjective, depending on what you have going on. But there's a lot of information that you can just give samples of to drive them to different areas. And I think that's just going to get a lot better when we look at when the new modern audience targeting feature starts to be released, especially for first release tenants. So I'm really looking forward to that. What's next? The next thing we really need to do is start to build out our global navigation. Now understand that you got 3 different sets of navigation. You have the global navigation, you have the local navigation, which is going to change depending on if you're clicking on different sites. And then also you have the footer navigation, and we'll talk about when to use what, where's the best information to keep where, right? So let's get into that in the next video. But until then, definitely leave your comments in the comment section. Are there any how-tos or different scenarios that you're thinking of how do you bring in this information? I know I get a lot of comments on legacy or on-prem applications. And really from that perspective, if you're on your company's network or VPN because you're remote, if you're on your company's network, any link that's valid, like an email or on-prem intranet, is still going to be valid here. And the same with REST API services, right? So if you have an application that's on-prem and it's service enabled, you can call that REST API service within that's a custom web part. Within a custom web part, display that modern web part here on these pages, and you still will be able to see it. Now here's the caveat. The caveat is going to be if you're off the network, that URL is not going to be valid, right? Because it takes Windows integrated authentication or SSO or some type of authentication mechanism, assuming that you're on the network, you're authenticated, and that's what's going to make that REST API call valid. If you're off the network, that's not going to be valid. So from a web part perspective, you're going to have to test for both scenarios. And the biggest scenario is going to be, yeah, if you're looking at this intranet and you're on your network, yes, everything looks great. But the other scenario is going to, what if I'm on a mobile device, right? And you send me a news article or you display a web part on the page and I don't have access to that because I'm mobile and I'm not VPN in, right, to get access to this other information. So those are different scenarios that you have to take into account. And I think you can handle those gracefully without just kind of showing them an error. You can handle those gracefully through a web part. And maybe that'll be towards the end of this series, right? I didn't want this series to really get into customizing or extending out the modern SharePoint, but I know a lot of those scenarios are going to be key. So let's walk through it. In the next video, let's get through the navigation and build that out and talk about a strategy on when to use global versus local versus what's in the footer, and really start to round this out. All right, see you in the next video. And